Hey, welcome back. Today we're going to be looking at the Iliad, Book 5, where the war really begins to pick up and we focus in on the hero Diomedes. Before we jump into the action of this book, let's look at the characters. The most important character in this book, as I already mentioned, is Diomedes, the Greek hero. And he's been mentioned a few times already in the book, especially in those hero lineups. But this is his moment really to shine. He's a powerful hero who's going to be tearing up the battlefield, backed by Athena. But what makes him especially interesting in this book is how much he challenges the gods. If the gods seem to represent to some extent the fate that we're fighting against in our world, Diomedes explores what it's like to fight against fate, to fight against a universe that seems bent on destroying us. We've already seen how fickle the gods can be, how easily they wipe out all of their favorite humans with their petty whims. And for the most part, the humans just bend over and die, because what else can they do? But sometimes a character likes to fight against his fate. And Diomedes here encapsulates that idea. We also have the helpful Sthenelus, who is Diomedes' charioteer. And although he doesn't have a huge role to play here, he does back up Diomedes, even when it's scary. And as Diomedes is plowing through the battlefield, he relies heavily on Sthenelus to back him up. On the Trojan side, we see the hero Aeneas, who's famous enough to get a sequel from the Roman poet Virgil. Aeneas, we're going to see, has lots of connections with the gods. He's the son, after all, of the goddess Aphrodite. And so the gods tend to try to back him up a lot. In this section, he teams up with the character Pandarus, who we've already met, the archer. And Pandarus, on the other hand, is going to be continually frustrated by the gods, like he was previously in the book. We're also going to briefly get to see the Trojan heroes Hector and Sarpedon. Hector, of course, is the great hero of the Trojans, and we will spend more time on him in the future. And Sarpedon, not actually a Trojan, but a Trojan ally, gives a pretty rallying speech in this book. Finally, we have the gods and goddesses. A lot of them are just reprising their same roles, but we have a few great moments with gods in this, especially as Diomedes challenges them. We have Athena, who's definitely working the battlefield and backing up Diomedes. We'll see her manipulate some of the other gods and goddesses as well. We have Aphrodite, whose character we've already examined quite a bit, and she's going to continue in that role, although she does step in as a mother in this section because she's the mother of Aeneas. However, she's not very good on the battlefield. On the other hand, we have the deadly archer Apollo and the god of war Ares, who are going to step in for the Trojans as well, and also help to defend the fallen hero Aeneas. We've already looked some at Apollo, and he continues in the same vein of the pride of the gods. He thinks that he is so much above the humans, and that what the humans doesn't matter. When a human, Diomedes, starts challenging the gods, he is very upset by that. You can't do that! And of course, Ares, the god of war. One would think that the god of war would be particularly terrifying, but Ares always, to me, seemed kind of like a big baby. He causes trouble, he stirs up conflict, but he can't take it very well. Alright, so let's look at how the action is unpacked in this section. From the very beginning of this book, it focuses in on Diomedes, who steps up to fill the gap that Achilles left in the Greek army. Achilles was their great hero, but since he's been sitting on the side and not participating, somebody else has to step up and be heroic. And Diomedes gets that chance. Not only that, but as soon as the book begins, we see Athena really backing Diomedes. She gives him an extra boost of, we'll call it, god power. Then Pallas Athena granted Tydeus' son Diomedes strength and daring, so the fighter would shine forth and tower over the Argives and win himself great glory. She set the man ablaze, his shield and helmet flaming with tireless fire, like the star that flames at harvest, bathed in the ocean, rising up to outshine all other stars. Such fire Athena blazed from Tydides' head and shoulders, drove him into the center where the masses struggled on. And so as Diomedes starts tearing up the field, then Athena steps over to Ares and tries to get him to sit out. But Athena, eyes bright, taking Ares in hand, called the violent god away with, "Ares, Ares, destroyer of men, wreaking blood, stormer of ramparts, why not let the mortals fight it out for themselves? Let Zeus give glory to either side he chooses. We'll stay clear and escape the father's rage." And so, luring the headlong Ares off the lines, Athena set him down on Scamander's soft sandy banks. while Argives bent the Trojans back. So Athena pours god power into Diomedes, really charges him up, and then pulls Ares to the side so that Ares won't participate for the Trojans. She's sneaky like that. The book continues with several different one-on-one matches where the Greeks seem to be doing particularly well. Different Greek heroes step in and kill their man. And Diomedes himself is ripping up the field. And at about line 104 in Fagel's translation, Pandarus sees Diomedes. But the shining archer Pandarus marked him storming down the plain, smashing the Trojan lines before him. Quickly, he trained his reflex bow on Diomedes, charging straight ahead. He shot. He struck him full in the right shoulder under the breastplate's hollow. The ripping point tore deep, shearing its way through. Armor splattered with blood as Pandarus triumphed, shouting over Tydides wildly, "Move up, attack, my high-hearted Trojans! Lash your stallions! Look, the Achaeans' champion's badly wounded! I shot him down! I swear he won't last long, if the archer really sped me here from Lycia." Bragging so. But the whizzing arrow had not brought him down. Diomedes just drew back beside his car and team, and stood there calling Sthenelus, Capaneus' son. "Quick, Sthenelus, down from the car, my friend, and pull this wretched arrow from my shoulder." Sthenelus sprang from the car, hit the ground, and standing beside him, pulled the tearing arrow clean on through the wound, and blood came shooting out like a red lance through the supple mesh shirt. And Diomedes, lord of the war cry, prayed aloud, "Hear me, daughter of Zeus, whose shield is thunder, tireless one Athena, if you ever stood by my father, with all your love amidst the blaze of battle, stand by me. Do me a favor now, Athena. Bring that man into range and let me spear him. He's wounded me off guard, and now he triumphs. He boasts I won't look long in the light of day." And so Pandarus gets a good shot off, which is his second big, significant shot in the battle. The first, he hit Menelaus, but of course Athena cheated a little bit and let the arrow pierce him in a non-vital spot. Now he hits Diomedes, another of Athena's favorites. In this case, it looks like he's wounded him pretty well, but Diomedes, instead of giving up, turns to Athena for more support. She's already given him some god power. Let's see what she does next. So Tydides prayed, and Athena heard his prayer, put spring in his limbs, his feet, his fighting hands, and close beside him winged him on with a flight of orders. "Now take heart, Diomedes, fight it out with the Trojans. Deep in your chest I've put your father's strength." He never quaked, that Tydeus, the great horseman, that what force the famous shieldsman used to wield. "Look, I've lifted the mist from off your eyes that's blurred them up to now, so you can tell a god from man on sight. So now, if a god comes up to test your mettle, you must not fight the immortal powers head on. All but one of the deathless gods, that is. If Aphrodite, daughter of Zeus, slips into battle, she's the one to stab with your sharp bronze spear." So Athena gives him an extra boost of god power, which allows him to actually fight against the gods, be able to see who they are. And she tells him, don't use this against any of the gods because you'll get yourself killed. But if you see Aphrodite, you can fight her. So he's able to understand if one of the gods is stepping onto the field to kind of cheat. And so the arrow wound, instead of knocking him out of battle, actually gives him a bonus charge thanks to Athena. It says, "Now long ablaze as he was to fight the Trojans, triple the fury seized him, claw-mad as a lion some shepherd tending woolly flocks in the field has just grazed. A lion leaping into the fold, but he hasn't killed him, only spurred his strength, and helpless to beat him off, the man scurries for shelter, leaving his flocks panicked, lost as the ramping beast mauls them thick and fast, piling corpse on corpse, and in one furious bound clears the fenced yard. So raging Diomedes mauled the Trojans." Like a lion who's just been nicked and has gotten really angry because of it, now he's ripping through the field worse than before. And then we have a couple pages describing him slaughtering people. But Aeneas sees this terror ripping through the fields and responds. But Aeneas marked it all, and oblivious to the rain of spears, he waded in, hunting for Pandarus, hoping to find the archer. Find him he did, Lycaon's skilled, fearless son, and went right up to him and challenged him to his face. "Pandarus, where's your bow, your winged arrows, your archer's glory? No Trojan your rival here, no Lycian can claim to be your better, no. So up with you now, lift your hands to Zeus. You whip an arrow against that man, whoever he is, who routs us, wreaking havoc against us, cutting the legs from under squads of good brave men. Unless it's a god who smolders at our troops, engaged at a right we failed. When a god's enraged, there's thunder at our heads. So Aeneas teams up with Pandarus to fight against that person who's just tearing up their army. And Pandarus looks again, he says, that's Diomedes, I hit him! Something's going on! I thought I'd send him down to the house of death, but I've still not laid him low. And he curses the fact that he doesn't have a chariot to charge at Diomedes. Instead of bringing his chariot from home, he brought his fabled amazing bow. But what good has it done him? Both of his really important shots have failed today. So Aeneas says, well, I've got this super amazing awesome car with these amazing horses, and together we can go challenge Diomedes. You want to drive? You want shotgun? And Pandarus decides that Aeneas would be best driving his own chariot since his horse know him. And he'll get one more shot at Diomedes. But this time, instead of taking out his bow, he brings out the spear. Let's try something different. The bow didn't work. And so they bear down on Diomedes, and when Sthenelus sees them coming, he gets a little nervous. He's like, look at those guys, maybe we should, back up a little? But Diomedes is like, nah, I'm ready to take them. And he gives Sthenelus these commands. Hey, Sthenelus, as soon as I take these guys out, I want you to grab that amazing chariot. It's super cool, and I want it. So I want you to quickly whip our own chariot to the side and tie it off, jump on the field, grab their chariot as soon as I take these guys out. And so they rush each other, and Pandarus shouts at Diomedes, one mad bravado, lofty Tydeus boy will brave it out. So, my arrow failed to bring you down, my tearing shot, now for a spear. We'll see if this can kill you. Shaft poised, he hurled, and its long shadow flew, and it struck Tydides' shield, the brazen spearhead winging, drilling right on through to his breastplate. Pandarus yelled over him wildly now, you're hit! Clean through the side! You won't last long, I'd say. Now the glory's mine! Hit number 3 for Pandarus today, but it's again a failure. But never shaken, staunch Diomedes shot back, no hit, you missed! But the two of you will never quit this fight, I'd say, till one of you drops and dies and gluts with blood, Ares who hacks at men behind his rawhide shield. And so Diomedes chucks his own spear, and it hits Pandarus right between the eyes, completely decimates his face. And down he flies to the ground, and that's the end of Pandarus. But Aeneas, seeing his friend Pandarus down, decides to defend his corpse and try to protect him. And so Aeneas jumps off of the chariot and stands over the corpse of Pandarus to protect him and his friend's armor and body. But that stance only lasts for a second before Diomedes rips a huge boulder out of the ground and throws it and smashes Aeneas' leg. And so things look really bad for Aeneas. But he gets a little air support. And now the prince, the captain of men Aeneas, would have died on the spot if Zeus's daughter had not marked him quickly. His mother Aphrodite, who bore him to King Anchises tending cattle once. Around her beloved son, her glistening arms went streaming, flinging her shining robe before him, only a fold, but it blocked the weapons hurtling toward his body. She feared some Argive fast, with chariot team, might hurl bronze in his chest and rip his life out. And so Aphrodite swoops to his rescue and covers him with her arms and her robe so that he won't get hurt. But this is an opportunity that Diomedes has been waiting for. Remember, he can see the gods thanks to Athena's god power, and the one god that he's been allowed to fight is Aphrodite. Meanwhile, Sthenelus is grabbing that awesome car and running away. Diomedes, with his ruthless bronze, was hunting Aphrodite. Diomedes, knowing her for the coward goddess she is. None of the mighty gods who marshal men to battle. Neither Athena nor Enyo, raider of cities. Not at all. But once he caught her, stalking her through the onslaught, gallant Tydeus' offspring rushed her, lunging out, thrusting his sharp spear in her soft, limp wrist, and the brazen point went slashing through her flesh, tearing straight through the fresh immortal robes the Graces themselves had made her with their labor. He gouged her just where the wrist bone joins the palm, and immortal blood came flowing quickly from the goddess, an ichor that courses through their veins, the blessed gods. They eat no bread, they drink no shining wine, and so the gods are bloodless, so we call them deathless. A piercing shriek, she reeled and dropped her son. And so Diomedes manages to strike Aphrodite. He manages to strike one of the gods. And she flies away, leaving Aeneas on the battlefield. But Apollo steps in to protect Aeneas himself. And Diomedes taunts her as she flies away. She grabs Ares' chariot and flies back up to Mount Olympus and begins to cry to her mother, Dione. And Dione, who is able to heal her basically instantaneously, also comforts her by telling her stories about times that the gods had been injured or been disgraced in this way. And she reiterates that people who fight the gods don't tend to live very long. Doesn't the son of Tydeus know deep down that the man who fights the gods does not live long? Nor do his children ride his knees with cries of "Father," home at last from the wars and heat of battle. But while Dione is comforting Aphrodite and healing her, Athena and Hera are mocking her. Athena taunts her to Zeus, saying, I think she just got a pinprick from one of her fancy brooches that the young ladies that she's always stirring up into trouble wear. And Zeus kind of nods and says, yeah, Aphrodite, I don't know what you're doing on the battlefield anyway. You're not a battle god. You need to stay off the battlefield. I'm definitely sidelining you. Meanwhile, back on the battlefield, Diomedes is not going to let go of his prize of Aeneas. He's taken out Aeneas' leg, but he wants his life. But the god Apollo, whom he doesn't have permission to fight, is protecting Aeneas. And so Diomedes is trying to dodge past Apollo to get at Aeneas with his spear. And Apollo is incredibly incensed at this. How dare this puny mortal try to fight past a god? The fourth time that he charges at Apollo, Apollo says, Think, Diomedes, shrink back now. Enough of this madness, striving with the gods. We are not of the same breed. We never will be the deathless gods and men who walk the earth. With that, Diomedes takes one step back, and Apollo uses the opening to snatch up Aeneas and vanish from the battlefield. And he's so ticked off at Diomedes for having the audacity to fight the gods that he sends Ares after him. Ares, destroyer of men, reeking blood, stormer of ramparts. Can't you go and drag that man from the fighting? That daredevil Diomedes, he'd fight Father Zeus. He's just assaulted Love. He stabbed her wrist. Like something superhuman, he even charged at me. Ares, of course, has been sitting over here on the side because Athena put him over here, and he's not been participating at all. And so Apollo sort of wakes him up, and he goes, oh yeah, I guess I should be participating. And so Ares rushes down to the fighting, stirs up the men, and so the Trojan army begins to rally and gets ready to fight back against Diomedes. And actually, Apollo had left this decoy Aeneas there on the field to distract everyone while he snatched the real Aeneas away to heal him. And so Ares rallies the Trojans, saying, your brother Aeneas is out there on the field, you gotta run defend him. Go save him! And while he's rallying the men, Sarpedon turns to Hector and gives a rallying speech himself. We mentioned Sarpedon is not from Troy, he's an ally of Troy. He's come in to help the Trojans. And he says, hey, I'm not defending my home turf here, and yet I'm pouring my blood, sweat, and tears into this battle. Why aren't you and your brothers doing more, Hector? This is your homeland you're defending. And Hector feels the challenge, and he also helps to lead the charge. Now Hector has the god Ares riding with him, invisible to everyone, except to Diomedes, who can see the gods thanks to Athena. And so he begins to tear back through the Greek line. And to help out the Trojans even more, Apollo picks up the newly healed Aeneas and sets him back right in the middle of his men, who look at him and are like, oh, hey, you're back, cool. And so he's leading his men into battle as well. We still have some of the Greek heroes doing damage, like Agamemnon, but Aeneas and Hector and Sarpedon and these great Trojan heroes are now doing a lot of damage too. After Aeneas slaughters a few of the really important Greeks, Menelaus gets all worked up and he tries to run out and attack as well. And it looks like Aeneas is about to take out Menelaus when Antiochus jumps in and defends Menelaus. And Aeneas isn't ready to take on two of them at once. Okay, lots of fighting back and forth. Meanwhile, what is Diomedes doing? Well, Diomedes looks up and he sees Ares riding with Hector, and he realizes that the Greeks are in trouble. Ares there. And for all his war cries, Diomedes shrank at the sight. As a man at a loss, helpless, crossing a vast plain, halts short at a river rapid surging out to sea, takes one look at the water roaring up in foam and springs back with a leap. So he recoiled, shouting out to comrades, "Oh, my friends, what fools we were to marvel at wondrous Hector. What a spearman, we said, what a daring fighter. But a god goes with him always, beating off disaster. Look, that's Ares beside him now, just like a mortal. Give ground, but faces fronting the Trojans always. No use trying to fight the gods in force." So Diomedes knows that he's limited in how much he can fight the gods. He's already fought the gods some. He fought Aphrodite with permission. And he kind of fought at Apollo a little bit without permission, but here's Ares charging at him, and he knows he's not supposed to fight Ares. If he's going to go face to face with Ares, he's probably going to die. But he doesn't want his men to back up either. And so he tells them to keep facing front, but don't directly challenge Hector with Ares riding beside him. And Hector starts ripping things apart for the Greeks. Also, Sarpedon's doing pretty good work until he trades spears with one of the Greeks and takes an injury. Sarpedon is lying down there, and his men grab him and start dragging him back to protect him. And for a moment, it looks like Sarpedon's about to gasp out his last breath. But it sounds like, sort of loosely and vaguely, like the gods are protecting Sarpedon. They don't want him to die. Particularly because he's the son of Zeus, which is kind of important. There's a brief hint that Zeus isn't going to let him die here. But Hector, seeing Sarpedon down, charges on past him without even pausing to say, "Hey, sorry, Sarpedon," and jumps back into the field, doing more slaughter. And the slaughter against the Greeks is getting so bad that Hera jumps in her car and rushes up to talk to Zeus about it. Are you just gonna let Ares tear things up like that? That's not fair. Ares shouldn't participate in the fight. And Zeus responds and says, "Leap to it then. Launch Athena against him, the queen of plunder. She's the one, his match, a marvel at bringing Ares down in pain." And so Athena and Hera rush down onto the battlefield. Hera does a little bit more than her usual. She stirs up the men to fight, while Athena steps over and taps Diomedes again. Diomedes, meanwhile, is standing back because he's not supposed to fight gods anymore. And after all, he does have a big arrow wound in his side from the beginning of the book. And he's kind of dabbing the gore in his hole there. And Athena starts by taunting him a bit, being like, "Your dad wouldn't have backed out from the fight like this." But Diomedes points out that she specifically told him not to fight any of the gods, and that's Ares right there. But now Athena says, "We can take him if we tag team." "True son of Tydeus, Diomedes, joy of my heart, forget the orders. Nothing to fear, my friend, neither Ares nor any other god. You too, I'll urge you on with so much winning force. Up now, lash your horses at Ares first. Strike him at close range, no shrinking away here before the headlong Ares. Just look at the maniac, born for disaster, double-dealing, lying, two-faced god. Just now he promised me and Hera, the war god swore he'd fight the Trojans, stand behind the Argives. But now look, he's leading the Trojan rampage, his pledges thrown to the winds." With that challenge, Athena levered Sthenelus out of the back of the car. A twist of her wrist and the man hit the ground, springing aside as the goddess climbed aboard, blazing to fight beside the shining Diomedes. So she just knocks Sthenelus out of the chariot and jumps in herself. She's gonna drive and let Diomedes do the spearing. And Athena puts on her dark helmet, which keeps Ares from being able to see her, so they can rush up on him unawares. But the butcher did see Tydeus' rugged son, and he dropped gigantic Pharaohus on the spot where he'd just killed him, ripping his life away. And Ares whirled at the stallion breaking Diomedes, the two of them closing fast, charging face to face, and the god thrust first over Tydides' yoke and reins, with bronze spear burning to take the fighter's life. But Athena, her eyes afire, grabbed the flying shaft and flicked it over the car, and off it flew for nothing. And after him, Diomedes yelled his war cry, lunging out with his own bronze spear. And Pallas rammed it home, deep in Ares' bowels, where the belt cinched him tight. There Diomedes aimed and stabbed. He gouged him down his glistening flesh, and wrenched the spear back out, and the brazen god of war let loose a shriek, roaring, thundering loud as 10,000 combat soldiers shrieked with Ares' fury when massive armies clash. A shudder swept all ranks, Trojans and Argives both, terror-struck by the shriek the god let loose. Ares, whose lust for slaughter never dies. And so Athena blocks Ares' shot and then stabs home right into Ares' gut. Good work, Diomedes and Athena. And then what does Ares do? Well, he screams really loud, so loud that he shakes the whole battlefield, and flies up to Mount Olympus to go crying to Zeus. much like Aphrodite. I mean, you'd expect it of her, not so much Ares. And he whines and whines how Athena came onto the battlefield and messed things up, and he just can't stand it. Oh, it's so awful. Zeus does not care. And his comment to Ares is, hey Ares, nobody likes you. Get over it. Of course they heal him because he's one of the gods, but he's trouble. He's the god of war. He always causes conflict, and nobody likes conflict. And so some epic fighting with some gods is over, and Hera and Athena sit back and enjoy the battle, back on Mount Olympus. End of book 5. Okay, let's talk about the cool features of this book. First of all, there's some fun irony that is built into the narrative voice here. For example, in line 675, there's one character who gets slashed off of his chariot. And as he lands, fortunately, in a very soft, sandy bank. And it says, his lucky day. But the next moment he gets trampled to death by his horses. So clearly there's a bit of irony in the response to him here. There's also the moment when Aphrodite comes sobbing to her mother. And it says, and Aphrodite, who loves eternal laughter, sobbed in answer. The eternally laughing Aphrodite clearly is not laughing now. There's a lot of fun little moments like that hidden throughout the book if you're paying attention. As usual, there's some excellent epic similes in here, particularly the one about the injured lion. I already read before, when Diomedes takes a hit from Pandarus but then is given the extra god power and charges back into the fight, there's a wonderful epic simile about him being a lion tearing up a sheep flock. We also see a lot of personification. In line 682, uproar is turned into a person. But even the gods themselves are often personifications of ideas, and that becomes very clear when we look at Ares, who is a representation of war. When Zeus chides Ares and says, hey Ares, nobody likes you, he's not talking about Ares as a person, although he is too. He's talking about Ares as a concept, the concept of war. Nobody enjoys war, which goes nicely with some of the big themes of this book. And of course our themes are developed through this section as well. The cost of war, we see that again with each character killed, there's usually a little bit of a backstory, exploring how they are an important person and their death will have an impact on the world around them. But there's also the theme throughout this book of the struggle against fate. And Diomedes fighting the gods becomes the idea, to some extent, of us struggling against those things that we can't seem to control. When Dione tells Aphrodite that people who struggle against the gods have short lifespans, we see sometimes that fate will do us in anyway. But yet there's a nobility about struggling against fate that one doesn't see when one just sits down and accepts it. Thanks for watching. Next time we will look at book 6, which is one of my favorite books in the Iliad, and we'll see what Hector does now that he no longer has Ares backing him up. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.